Warhammer 40k, something that is close to my heart. It's probably an understatement in all honesty. It has seen such a disturbance very recently, with Games Workshop seemingly bending the knee to DEI, inclusion, representation, in a universe that is literally representative of the opposite. Now, so far I have resisted commenting on the Gamersgate and the DEI crap that permeates all of media these days, apart from when it relates to something I am specifically reviewing. This isn't because I don't care, because I massively do, but it's more because I'm not sure what I can say that adds much to the argument at the time, as I would effectively be parroting something someone else says. That said, I've been paying a lot of attention to the developments with Warhammer, and all I can say is something in me flipped. Now, we are of course talking about the release of the 10th edition and the Adeptus Custodes Codex, which now tells us that apparently female custodes exist. Now, this is all despite all of the lore to date never once having referenced them not being in any of the extensive collection of books, of which I have most, if not all, and everything that we know from previous editions specifically stating that they don't exist, and yet we are now told that they do exist, and we have utter morons working for Games Workshop on Twitter saying stuff like, since the first of the 10,000 were created, there have always been female custodians. Not that they are a new thing, but that they were always there. Well, if they were always there, why haven't you alluded to them? Particularly when your previous editions specifically state that all custodians begin their lives as the infant sons of the noble houses of Terra. This is from the 8th edition, and if you were to check out the 40k wiki, they've effectively amended this statement and added daughters in. But we've had several editions which basically keep the same canon that they are the sons. Now, I know that we live in a world where someone can call themselves an orange if they decide to identify as an orange, but sons, specifically for me, means male, not female. So this is a massive retcon. There's no two ways about it. And people keep bringing up that Warhammer has had previous retcons. And there's a couple of points I would like to make about previous retcons. A lot of the retcons were from the first 3 editions, where the lore was very fluid because basically it didn't massively exist. We now have a universe which is expansive, has 60 or so Horus Heresy books, Christ knows how many 40k books as well, including books specifically on the Custodes, where custodians form the main characters or very significant characters within those books. We also have a lot more games, as well as a shed ton more material through the codexes. And that in turn makes a change of this proportion more damaging. You're not just changing something going forward, you're changing something which affects potentially everything you've already done. And that's what Games Workshop, or the morons who work on their social media platform, don't seem to understand that people might have a problem with. It's not a simple change. At the very least, you're changing in excess of 10,000 years of history in this universe. Because in all of that content that we've had, every single custodian which is featured is male. Now, personally, I can't help but think that this is either related to BlackRock or Vanguard with their ESG absolute crap, which is just permeating all media, or it is Amazon who, with their stupid DEI quota that they have when they make any show, needs to box tick. Now, it could well be both, but I think it's more likely the latter, particularly as there are rumours circulating that Amazon requested these changes because they want a girl boss in armor as well as being a girl boss out of armor. So basically they need someone to be genetically altered. And they can't do it with Space Marines, which we'll come on to later. So they decided to go down the Custodes route. Because, like it or not, unfortunately, they are right. There's no reason why the custodians have to all be male. There's no reason why they couldn't introduce female custodians, but if they did, it would have to be introducing them going forward, because they can't go back and introduce them when they've already turned around and said that they are specifically the sons of the noble houses of Terra. So there is a way that you can add these, but you have to do it going forward. So there would be female custodians in the future. There can't already have been female custodians. But they didn't want that because Quite clearly, Amazon needs it now. It needs it to have already happened. If indeed it is Amazon, but I 100% believe that it is Amazon. It just might also be BlackRock or Vanguard. But that isn't what they wanted, because they needed to have already happened quite clearly for some reason. And that's what makes me think that it is something to do with the Amazon show. Because the reality is, if they are adapting a story and they want more female characters within that story, to the point where they need a custodian, that custodian needs already to have existed to fit into a story which has already happened. Now, the rumours go on to say that Games Workshop did push back, offering every alternative option, but they have ultimately given in if these rumours are true. And what's worse is the Games Workshop social media teams obviously have said that they're always there. Now when people point out that they're wrong, they just get blocked, and that's it. Now, if we do go with the tact that it is Amazon, my only opinion is, how about you scrap your DEI and just concentrate on telling or adapting a good story? Be truthful to the source material, because realistically, everything that you've adapted so far, with the exception of Reacher, has been diabolically written dog shit, where the checkboxes that you've ticked literally end up looking like neon signs. Now, obviously, there has been a lot of backlash on social media from a wide variety of fans. And we have, there's no way to put this, rags like PC Gamer, basically the Access media, coming out and seemingly almost attacking fans of their hobby, their universe, who care about the canon, the lore, as being sexist. Now, this has nothing to do with the fact that literally you might just want something to make sense, rather than having the controllers of your hobby turn around and say that you're wrong and that they've always existed despite all of the evidence to the contrary, which I think is a lot of the backlash that is happening here. But if this is all to do with sexism, as there is a significant attempt to move it to a sexist argument, then why do female fans of the Warhammer universe also dislike this change? And the answer is, it's a storyline issue. They're spitting in the face of fans by turning around and not only changing the canon in this way, but by also claiming that the fans are wrong and that they've always been a thing. Now, I do have my own personal opinions on this, and I believe that this problem arises when a company or a person controls an IP and doesn't actually care or isn't a fan of the IP. And I've thought for a while that, particularly with Games Workshop products, that they've been ran by accountants. And while clearly I would not say that the people on their social media accounts are accountants, because let's face it, they're thick, what I would say is they are clearly not fans. At best, they are tourists, but I wouldn't mind betting that they don't even give a shit about the hobby, the lore, or anything to do with Warhammer 40k. So this is the article from PC Gamer. Warhammer 40k has slightly more women in it, and the neckbeards aren't happy. Now, I must admit myself, I'm probably not that much growth away from having a neckbeard, but neckbeards traditionally meant people who were a bit socially awkward, usually nerds and geeks. It's Warhammer 40k. I'm pretty sure most people who play Warhammer 40k definitely associate themselves with at least nerd or geek culture. The problem is that the modern day understanding of neckbeard contains a wide variety of characteristics which make up the term, one of which is being sexist. He then goes on to say, we're still not at female space marines, but give it time. Now this guy clearly knows nothing about 40k. Absolutely nothing. He doesn't see the problem, because the problem has nothing to do with them having more women in. We already have female forces in 40k. We have the Sisters of Silence, we have the Sisters of Battle, we have female Inquisitors. So it's not like there's a shortage of female forces already in 40k. And the ones that exist make sense. They're ingratiated into the lore. So if you added more, and you ingratiated them into the universe, moving forward, not trying to change a pre-established universe to suggest that they've already been existed, I'm okay with that. I don't have a problem with it at all. And the reason I say that this guy knows nothing is because if they turn around and introduce female space marines, they break all of the pre-established lore. The reason for that is the Emperor is a man, the Primarchs, his sons, were made from his genetic material, so they're all men, and the gene seed which makes space marines is made from genetic material from the Primarchs, who are men, which means it's male genetic material. And just using a tiny bit of logic, I would imagine it has something to do with genetics and the fact that men are not women and can never be women, genetically. So it makes sense from a genetic standpoint that there cannot be female Space Marines. Now he goes on to say that most players seem to have responded to this by shrugging and getting back on, arguing about the new rules, but there's always a vocal minority who goes on a tear. This is not a vocal minority, this is quite a substantial amount of people. And the types of people who like 40k and are fans, seeing as fan is short of fanatic, actually care about their universe, they care about their hobby, they care about the story. And this flies in the face of all of that. Now he admits that this is a retcon, because it is. Like, this is the definition of a retcon. But then he turns around and goes to say that Warhammer has had fluid lore right from the start. The original custodian guards were depicted as shirtless hunks who never leave Earth, a long way from the heavily armoured, galaxy-spanning golden gods that they became. Now, as I've already said in this video, a lot of these changes, and a lot of the fluidity that they talk about, is from the early editions of the game. We've had a far more structured universe for at least the last 4 to 5 editions. And we've had a lot of lore to build on this in the form, particularly, of books. And whenever they've done one of these changes, usually it has come with expansion, context, and it's served to move things forward, or at the very least it's had an explanation as to why. But this just goes further to, again, provide evidence that he does not understand the universe that he's talking about, because they were depicted as individuals who did not leave Terra. Their duty was to protect the Emperor. Now, the reason for this was never really explained, but it was added in later, and it provided rationale as to why they were depicted as that, being the Edict of Restraint, which basically said that after the Horus Heresy, they had to stay on Terra to protect the Emperor. During the Indomitus Crusade, they were allowed to leave because the Edict of Restraint was lifted. So, again, as I've said, provide context, move the story forward, provide rationale, and make it make sense. So, by adding in this explanation, they provided so much more. It provides the context and explanation of why they are not allowed to leave Terra. Now, we have to remember that we are now comparing that to a throwaway amendment in a codex with zero explanation, zero rationale, zero context, that no one was supposed to pick up on. Bit of a difference. Now he then goes on to the rewriting of the Horus Heresy from a short story of a handful of pages into a series of 60 plus novels. Everything I've just said, you can say exactly again for this. It's expansion, it's context, it's reasoning, it's addition. It's not manipulation, it's not subtraction. It all provides context as to why the universe is the way it is. It all develops the story. So again, it's not the same. You're comparing apples and oranges. He then goes on to explain the 2 types of genetically engineered super soldiers. The fact that Space Marines are keyed to male hormones and tissue types, mainly because the source genetic material to make the gene seed is from a male. Therefore, it has to be given to males, at least that's my understanding, and that the custodes are enhanced via a unique process when they're infants. I'm guessing trying to suggest that there's no reason why the custodes have to be only men, and he's right. There is no reason why the custodes have to only be men, but they wrote in their story that they are. So you could have female custodes going forward, as I've said before, but you can't just go, they've always existed, because you've told us that they don't. Then he goes on to quote the former head of IP, Alan Merritt, that the reason that there aren't female Space Marines has nothing to do with law. And the reason was that in the 1980s, people didn't buy them. They only bought the male packs. So then, when they fully designed and fleshed out Warhammer 40k, they made sure that the poster boys were male. But it doesn't matter the reason why you took the decision to make them male. The fact that you're turning around and saying that all the background fluff about why there's only male Marines is there to justify a commercial logistics issue, again, doesn't matter. The moment that you make male Space Marines, and then you give the background fluff the lore as to why there are only male Space Marines, that then becomes a rule, because you've explained within the fluff why they're male. So you can't break that fluff then, without bloody good reason. And he goes on to say that the same was true of the Adeptus Custodes, which may well be the case. But again, as soon as you bring out the background fluff, and you explain it that way, it is that way. So they wrote it that they were male, and they came from sons, therefore they are male. And he does go on at least to admit that there is a female audience, but doesn't once consider the possibility that that female audience might not agree with him, and that they might have an issue with these changes as well. Then once again, he goes on to be derogatory about the people who play, saying that the men now are a lot less likely to throw a hissy fit about having women in their armies than gamers in the 1980s. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I know loads of men who have Sisters of Silence, or the Sisters of Battle, just as I know that a lot of the female players will have Space Marine armies. So, I don't know what the point is that he's making there, other than being a bit of a knob. And he signs it off basically saying that with all of the 40k lore, it only exists in order to provide context. Yes, he's admitted that it provides context, but doesn't seem to see the issue with this change providing no context at all for selling toy soldiers to people. And as the customer base changes, so too will that lore. You can change lore if it moves it forward, if it's explained, if it adds context to a situation. If it's pre-established, you can't go back 10,000 years and change something which has ramifications on the entirety of everything that goes forward. You just can't. And the stupid thing is that the customer base, for the most part, hasn't changed. There's been women involved in 40k for a while. So this audience already exists. And speaking about what I've seen on Twitter, the people who care so much for this change to happen don't even give a shit about 40k. So they're not making this change to follow the customer base. They're making this change in spite of the customer base. So that doesn't even make sense. Now, in the grim dark of the future, the only thing that's really true is life is cheap. Humanity is solely driven by survival and war. The deaths of billions happen on a regular occurrence, with the average person just being a cog in a wheel of industry dedicated to war. All of humanity is xenophobic, hyper-religious fanatics who regularly kill, burn, and exterminate anyone who thinks differently to them. How exactly is this universe DEI friendly? Why does this universe have to represent the world of today? Which is what they're trying to make it do. It's a work of fiction. And funnily enough, fiction doesn't have to match reality. It actually has a story. And it's a story that I like. And now we've got people trying to manipulate the universe to be more representative of the attitudes of today. Those very same attitudes which are destroying films, TV, games, and anything else that they start to infect. The question that I would pose to any fellow fan is, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do when the slow infection of DEI, representation of everyone, no matter how insignificant they actually are, takes hold, chips away its story, chips away its lore, chips away its substance, basically slowly destroys the universe that you and I love? And I say insignificant because we have a real problem where there seems to be this notion that there's a God-given right for everyone to be represented all the time, every time. And it is just not feasible. And the people who think that this is something that should be done try to cram their ideology everywhere, even if you accepted that representation was necessary, which I don't. Are they trying to cram this ideology and force these changes out of wanting to be included or involved in the hobby or the universe? Clearly not. I don't even play this game. What are you doing commenting? It's got absolutely nothing to do with you. But I go to my local game stores and I look at the minis for sale and all I see are men. Having a token female mini in most of the armies is not representation. There's entire forces which are female. Unless you're telling me that roughly half the gendered minis are women, I see an issue. Why? Now I know that this is a hot take, but guess what? Half the people that are involved in 40k aren't women. Half the people that are involved in Games Workshop aren't women. It is a male-dominated hobby. The market decides. If an audience is majority men and they want to buy male figurines, then that will be catered to. And there is tons of female representation in 40k. And if people want to buy Space Marines, the law was set up in such a way that the genetically enhanced super soldiers were all male. So if people want to buy those, then all of the miniatures that are in your shop will be male. If they're not selling any Sisters of Silence or Sisters of Battle, then they won't restock them, because the demand is not there. It's called supply and demand, and if you don't understand that very basic concept, then you probably shouldn't be looking like a fucking clown on Twitter, because there is loads of female representation. And the Sisters of Silence, by my understanding, are as good as the Custodes, but for different reasons. If there's such an issue with custodians being male, well, how about we just retcon shit to say that the Sisters of Battle and the Sisters of Silence now have male members, despite the fact that they don't, because the giveaway word is sister. And then you've got other people who genuinely just have spite, who are happy about the fact that people feel like their hobbies are being stripped away from them. It's not done for pure reasons, and the people who are happy about these changes or actively pushing for them are not doing it because it adds anything. They're doing specifically because it takes away from the people who enjoy that thing. So what I would ask is, if there's already women who enjoy the Warhammer universe, why change it? Ultimately, you could end up having a Star Wars situation here, where you change a universe on the quest for more female audience and alienate the male audience and the female audience that you had in order to try to include people who don't even care. And this change, it doesn't add anything to the universe. It just alters pre-existing canon, provides detriment to the lore in order to push a message. And possibly the most tragic thing about all of this is if we believe the rumours that Games Workshop isn't the direct author of these changes, and that they're rolling over for Amazon's DEI agenda, why? Is it important to keep Amazon sweet at the expense of your fans and your day-to-day customers? And if so, for what? You've got a show that isn't even produced yet, that if things keep going the way they are, fans are probably going to hate out of principle, or because it's rubbish. If you've allowed them to dictate such a change in your lore, where does that end? How many times are you going to allow them to dictate changes of such a type? How many changes to the lore are going to happen in order for Amazon to tick their boxes on the show? And who is this for? Who is DEI for? How does DEI benefit Games Workshop? Is it to appease or to introduce people like who we've just looked at? Or people like this, who believe that romance and human relations should be the centre of every 40k story? And that war and killing machines get boring real fast? It's called Warhammer. It's about war, fighting. The Space Marines are genetically enhanced killing machines. What you're saying is that you don't like 40k. So, here's an idea. Don't get involved. Everything doesn't have to be for everyone. Funnily enough, you can like something and dislike something. So if you want something like that, sod off and make it yourself. Don't infect and try to change everything that's pre-existing. Here's another one. I'm so happy that you've made it so custodians can be women. I don't play the game, but I'm planning to start soon. Well, if you were that interested in starting to play the game, then them making custodians to be women didn't affect you at all. And them making custodians to be women isn't the problem. The problem is that they've backdated it and said that they always were women. And then you've got another tube who turns around and says, once they remove the genocidal and misogynistic language from the game, I might consider starting to play it myself. Well, I didn't realise that there was misogynistic language in the game, and the genocide involved in the game is kind of twofold, because yes, humanity is trying to wipe out everyone, but everyone is also trying to wipe out humanity. And again, it's about war. And William here, sadly the voice of reason in this conversation with this absolute moron, 40k won't be 40k if they keep changing it. It won't. But this guy goes on to say that he wants to use it as a tool for teaching students about inclusion. Find other examples. As I've already said, this is not a universe that lends itself to DEI. And he goes on to say, I want to play this game. So he doesn't already. I just don't want it to be about boring war and death stuff. It's called Warhammer. You absolute retard. Now, the one thing I will say is these guys are retards. They don't deserve our ire, so please do not message them. Do not flame them. They deserve our pity, if anything, because they don't understand basic language or concepts. I just can't help but think that this is all down to Amazon's cinematic universe. Because from Games Workshop's point of view, the people singing about these changes don't have anything to do with their product, won't buy their product, won't get involved, and were never involved to begin with. The people who are complaining about these changes are people who have spent countless hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of pounds on their product. They are their core audience, and you're alienating your core audience on the off chance that Amazon does not completely shit the bed, which I fully expect, to try to bring normies into your customer base. The problem is, though, normies eventually get bored and sod off. Look at Marvel. And if I'm being honest, Games Workshop's practices are hardly normie friendly. You bring out a new edition every 3 to 5 years, and you discontinue previous minis in order to sell new minis. A normie is not gonna put up with that very long, if at all. And if you've alienated your core audience, and they leave, even if the Amazon Cinematic Universe isn't a complete dumpster fire, you might do well for 5 to 10 years, but as Disney can tell you, once those normies leave, you're completely screwed. And I really, really think Amazon is going to damage 40k with the Amazon Prime universe, and probably scapegoat Henry Cavill. And as part of this quest for the Amazon Prime Warhammer universe, I just can't see the changes stopping here, and with this. And now that Games Workshop has given Amazon an inch, they will inevitably try to take a mile. And it'll be us, the fans, who love the universe, who will suffer for it. Now, the only way that you can send a message back to them is by hitting them where it hurts, with your wallet. Now, I hate asking people to impact themselves by taking a stand. And I know it might be hard not to partake in the hobby that you love. But all I would ask is that if you have to buy less. If you can do without, do without. If you can cancel a subscription, cancel a subscription. If the Amazon universe is an absolute shit show, make it known. Send them a message that their agenda does not belong in our hobby. Now, some people may think that this is a rather extreme response for what could be seen as a minor change. But it's not the change that's the problem. It's what the change itself represents. It's a change that has happened many times before in other mediums. It's the point where you give these individuals and their ideology a foot in the door, which ultimately leads to further appeasement and the sacrifice of substance and story in favour of representation for a perceived modern-day audience. Despite the fact that this perceived modern-day audience largely doesn't exist, and they are not the individuals buying the product in the first place. They are keyboard warriors who don't care but feel that their opinion should be forced upon everyone else. But anyways, with that, that's it from me, so that's it for you.